let's peel back a little bit though, talking about CI/CD and maybe merging this whole LLM and
get back
JFrog.
to our topic. Yes.
Yeah, but putting it together, right? Like, I think my 2 cents, right? There's a technical aspect of all of this, right? Setting up CI/CD for the first time, understanding the impacts of it, understanding the impacts of setting up AI in your company and how your team's using it, right? But I think if we can pull back, right, and not talk about the tool, but talk about culture. What have you seen through your career as teams want to adapt or buy into the CI/CD life, right? Like, what cultural challenges do most companies run into?
So, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Well, let's start at the top.
Yeah. So it depends on how DevOps is being introduced to a company, or how CI/CD is being introduced into a company.
And to be clear, though, DevOps is the whole thing. CI/CD is a portion of the whole thing.
CI/CD is a very important tool in the DevOps toolbox. So it's probably one of the more used tools in the. So it's considered your high-end socket set in your toolbox.
But in it, you also have like your Git repo, your
version
npm
control portion. So the CI/CD pipeline pretty much ties most of the tools together. It's probably not necessarily tying the IDE in there, but sometimes you kick off the pipeline from inside your IDE, going back to your whole F5.
Yeah, because even with Jira, you'll see the results of the CI/CD in Jira. So it's all intermingled somehow.
Yeah. So a lot of times, multiple places to route your pipeline, you may be reporting back to Jira on, hey, this failed or this passed or whatever, or even reporting back to Confluence. So you have a dashboard of, hey, these are where all my pipelines are, especially if you are building multiple different things in your organization. But what was the original question?
The culture, like, what are the biggest challenges? Because I don't think.
Oh, okay, yeah. Back to the culture.
There's a couple of challenges when you're rolling out CI/CD. There's a few challenges. There's technical ones and there's non-technical ones. I've been in conversations where, is it Jenkins? Is it TeamCity? Is it Circle CI? Which one do we want? Right? Is it GitHub Actions? Is it GitLab? Is it Bitbucket pipelines? Right? Like, there's just so many tools to choose from, but that's a layer of conflict and decision making that has to happen.
It can become a religious war on which tool to pick.
Right.
And I try to avoid religious wars. Huge religious wars in the IDE, which IDE should be the standard in our development group. And it depends on what you're developing. But which version control tool are we going to use? Are we going to go GitHub or GitLab?
Yeah,
back in the days,
but to make the decision for all that, you have an underlying cultural problem that you need. You should probably work on first.
Yeah. How do you organize your teams? Is the software developer going to be the one responsible for creating a CI/CD pipeline, or is it? Are you going to stand up an application or a software development tool group? Which is one of the things I started out as specializing in. In the 90s, I started forming software development tool organizations at different companies. And then that's why I spun out my own company to do just that. And then we got, quickly embedded in things like Atlassian and GitLab and GitHub for that. But who's in charge of creating this? Often software definitely is very invested in what you set up and how you set it up, how you maintain it.
But
really
most of the time,
code for all this.
But most of the time, it's your IT department that has to maintain it after it's been set up.
Sometimes, and usually IT departments don't want anything to do with applications. They're like, we'll take care of the servers and maybe the network if you're lucky. Maybe the mail server and like DNS and stuff. But when it comes to software development applications, most IT departments want a divorce.
They want to wash their hands from that problem.
They want to wash their hands. And that's where you get into, a DevOps team, which I'm completely against DevOps teams. I don't think creating so DevOps is supposed to be getting rid of silos. So you shouldn't create a new silo and call it DevOps. Um, and so many companies do. In fact, like, I don't know, 9 out of 10 of my current clients do that kind of stuff. And it goes into another conversation that we should have in another episode about, is there such a thing as a DevOps engineer? And I'm going to argue no, you should not.
I was like, I hope there is, because I've been adding it as a tag to all our shorts.
Well, it's probably good for SEO, but they should not be a DevOps engineer.
So I used to be.
They should be a CI/CD engineer. They should be an automation engineer. They should be a platform engineer. But a DevOps engineer, no, that doesn't make any sense. Just like a DevOps team doesn't make any sense.
But why? Is it because it should just be rolled under the responsibility of the engineer?
Exactly. It should be roles. It could be your primary role, but it should be roles under regular engineers. So.
Yeah. So one of the so I worked in a couple of different teams, and one of the teams that I worked at, I was a software engineer, but my role as a software engineer was to do the DevOps portion of the thing. So I had a very minimal software engineering role and a much bigger DevOps type of role.
Mm-hmm.
In another team, in another company that I worked at, I was part of a dedicated DevOps team that was all titled software engineers, but we managed all the DevOps applications like Jira, Bitbucket, Bamboo, all of that.
So it is okay to have a team like that. That makes perfect sense, especially the larger the organization you have. But it's not really a DevOps team. That is more of an application administration team. So you're the administrator of all the different tools. You'll help you'll help the products or projects adopt the tools and use the tools, as well as being the administrator for it. But you're not necessarily dictating the DevOps practices that the different teams should use.
Right.
So some people may say that we're defining it too narrowly here, or cutting it too thinly. But yeah, you don't want to get into the point where that becomes a silo, because you want to break that down.
Yeah, because the biggest struggle that I see from now back to a cultural perspective is that, because you're basically the IT for the department, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that causes more friction than it helps.
It does.
When you start siling it out. Yeah. Your DevOps process should really be something that all your engineers care about, because part of the DevOps experience is the well-being of your code base, right? And it's everybody's responsibility. It's a shared responsibility. And it shouldn't just be on one team or one individual that's the poor person that has to build those pipelines out for you.
Yeah. So the core of what I see DevOps is a set of policies, tools, and people that are helping get the project from cradle to grave as quickly as possible, and as least friction as possible. As soon as you start making a centralized tool team, then the opportunity for friction increases. They all start with the best of intentions. We want to standardize usage across all teams that use these tools. We want to have a core set of tools for everybody. So every project's not Wild West using all their tools. But that team will tend to become less responsive than if the projects are doing it themselves, because it creates a silo. Not all processes fit all projects. So very quickly, if you're saying, hey, all my Jira projects, to use Jira as an example, has to use this template. It has to be cookie cutter. You're using the same workflow. You're using the same screens. You have to use the same fields. As a Jira admin, that makes perfect sense. And I can get in line with that. But at the project level, your project might have slightly different procedures for whatever reason, that you can't use the cookie cutter Jira project. You need to maybe report metrics on something that other projects don't even have. or you have an additional set of gates that your product has to go through that nobody else does. So now you have to get a one-off workflow. And then if you don't have your own, a Jira admin assigned to you, you have to go to the corporate team and get in line with the rest of the users and try to get prioritized. And ultimately it doesn't work. It becomes a bottleneck and just slows things down.